So there are many advantages to doing an IRT study. You can know a lot about how items work, you can know a lot about how a scale works, you can learn a lot about a theoretical trait or construct, looking at where your items show up at on the scale, looking at how the probabilities change across the latent scale. Huge advantages. So we also know that there's test equating for multiple forms and evolving forms. Like I talked about, let's say that you want to not give the same assessment to everyone and you want to have two different assessments, or you're in two different school districts and school district number 1 uses assessment A and school district number B uses assessment B. That would be totally something that could be accommodated for in an IRT study that was well thought out. The other thing that we know about IRT is that it allows us to look at how different groups do in a standardized way for subgroup analysis. So we can do that we can conduct a differential item function analysis, which unfortunately we don't have time to discuss in this class. It's kind of an advanced concept, but it allows us to rule out test bias. So anytime you hear of researchers who are doing studies to look at, do tests work the same for girls as boys, or for particular ethnic groups, do they function the same way? That's all based on IRT methodology. The other thing that we can start doing with IRT is we can make shorter assessments. As we know that measures work better and better and better, it becomes less important to give lengthier and lengthier assessments. All we need to do is be able to quickly classify respondents into the groups that they belong to, and that can be done through item response theory. The other thing that's fun about IRT, or interesting in my opinion, is that you can really start testing the validity of a theoretical construct. So if you don't know if something is real, or if you don't know if something is actually out there, or if it is theoretically valid, IRT can give you a method for that. So that's something that people need to keep in mind. So I've given some examples of IRT related questions, and they're right here. I came up with 5 of them for this. So the first thing I want to know is, how difficult are concepts? What are the developmental steps that are observed? Here's an interesting question. Do people really need to know trigonometry to learn calculus? That's something that IRT models would probably be able to help us understand. And in fact they are. That's certainly something that's showing up in the literature. Is there testing bias and or favor towards one group of respondents? Are there gender differences on responses? Those are examples of IRT research questions. What is the dimensionality of what is being tested? That's an IRT question. Is this construct theoretically valid? That's an IRT question. Is time a factor of concern in pre- and post-test designs? Also an IRT question. We can start looking at whether dimensions and items function the same last year as they did this year. Those are questions about the validity of pre-post assessment methods. So things like looking at how a group of students did in reading in 2nd grade, and then 3rd grade, and then 4th grade, and wondering, wow, did that time really play a factor in understanding their development in a scale? Those are kinds of questions that IRT can help us start answering. So I hope from this module that people will start thinking about how IRT is out there, how it's being used, and that at least you'll have a couple of questions that you can ask. If you see an IRT study, you'll be able to ask about dimensionality, you'll be able to understand that items can be understood in a lot of different ways in terms of their difficulty, their discrimination. You'll know that there's lots of different kinds of IRT models, and hopefully going back to the slide that I showed you earlier, you can start thinking of ways that you could look at your own assessment data to understand whether your assessment data works the way you think it should be working, or whether other researchers' assessment data is working the way they think it should be working. So that is the IRT lecture module. I will have one more tutorial which will cover some of the output of IRT in the data sets that you all have related to the core data sets. And we'll pick it up there.